In the summer of 2013, Top Dog Entertainment announced they planned to add two new artists to their roster. One of those artists was SZA, whose EPZ would arrive less than a year later in April of 2014. It's got a breezy, poetic yet melancholic feel to it, the very essence of that neo-soul alt R&B that SZA is now known for. I was very active on Tumblr when this EP came out and it was extremely popular, and I'm almost certain that that's how I even found the EP to begin with. But I think the first time I ever heard SZA's voice was on this song called 9, which is a collab with Willow.
Apology's an option. Let me hear it.
Very atmospheric, again, very melancholic. It's a perfect night drive song. But anyway, I knew of it because I listened to Willow's music, obviously, and was like, wow, whoever this SZA girl is, whoever this SZA girl is, I need to hear more of it. And by that point, the ZEP had been out for a few months. It was also all the way back in 2014 that recording sessions for Control began, or for the debut album that would become Control, as the album was initially planned for late 2015. But looking back at Top Dog's page, it's clear there was no rollout happening, as the videos of SZA's uploaded around the time were related to her ZEP, which that's nothing bad, since the EP wasn't even a year old at that point. It's just clear that there was no new rollout beginning. There have been several stories as to why, which I will revisit more fully, but the album was pushed back for the first time to 2016. At this point, alongside recording her own album, SZA was still writing songs for others, helping pen hits like Rihanna's Consideration or Beyonce Nicki's Feelin' Myself. SZA has since said that she wanted to put Consideration on Control and even made a video for it, but her label had already negotiated to give the song over to Rihanna without SZA's input. She said, "The song was like the centerpiece to my album at the time, and for her it was just like part of her album. And I was like, please, no."
It was already done, like whatever, the conversation, like label-wise, whatever was already done. So it was just a matter of like accepting, and like in hindsight, it was so hard to like go and accept.
But SZA has also said, "Now I'm so glad that that happened and that it didn't cost me anything. If anything, I gained a bunch from it. And I thank God that I made cool music outside of that. I don't know why, I just really thought my creativity would just stop and this was the pinnacle of what I could make." When SZA mentioned this a couple years ago, I did think it was kind of odd that people were acting like SZA was messy or weird or wrong for saying she was upset about this at the time, because it is her song. Maybe she doesn't technically own it anymore, but it's still her creative output, so the attachment to it makes sense. When you think about the fact that Anti came out in January of 2016, it makes it pretty clear that SZA and her label were still reworking the album at some point in 2015, maybe even up until late 2015 when the album was meant to be out. And throughout 2016, there really wouldn't be much more album news, or concrete news anyway. Because in February, Top Dog claimed that SZA's album was fourth stage creative, which people assumed meant close to done would be coming soon. But no official release date was ever announced, though at one point SZA implied the album might come out in the summer. And by that point, some fans just hoped SZA might instead independently release some singles, or an EP called A instead of an album, completing the unofficial trilogy, as she had an independent EP titled S, and then one titled Z that I mentioned, which was released through Top Dog. And also at the time, most people thought the album itself would be called A, so some were holding out hope that this trilogy project would culminate in the debut album A, while others were just like, make it an EP, drop that, and we can wait for a debut album when they'll actually let you put it out. And no EP came, but SZA did release a track called 2 AM, which is a flip of Party Next Door's Come and See Me.
2 a.m. again and I'm thinking, should I come through? Can I come kick?
She clearly did this without her label's permission because she tweeted on the same day, "So I'm still Punch, called me by my full name and said I can't post no more snippets. Thank him, LOL." And Punch was SZA's manager at the time. Their beef is historic and actually just recently split a few months ago. The day after this debacle, SZA did an interview with Entertainment Weekly that doesn't necessarily clear up what she exactly envisioned this project, confirmed to be A according to the article's headline at least, to B. And she said, "I've called it an EP forever because it made me feel way less responsible. It's longer than an EP for sure, but I still don't want to say the word album because that's impending doom. It's really just a long-ass EP, we'll say that." Regardless, A, the album, the long-ass EP, it did not come in the summer of 2016. Though in September, SZA would announce she finally got a release date for the album and that it would drop around her birthday in November. But just a month later in October, SZA would tweet that she quit music, after also saying in interviews that she was just over music altogether due to the frustrations over her album. One of the tweets in a now deleted series of tweets, SZA said, "I actually quit. Punch can release my album if he ever feels like it." And in response to SZA's slew of tweets, Punch posted a picture of the Joker, simply captioned LOL. It wasn't until January of 2017 that Drew Barrymore, the album's first single, would release.
Warming up outside, inside me.
It's a laid-back, almost folky feeling R&B song based around a tambourine and electric guitar. In it, SZA narrates the arrival of her crush and his friends at a party, primarily a girl she can't help but compare herself to. She admires the girl, but also hates her for making her feel insecure and making things awkward if SZA had wanted to chat with the guy that she likes, so she'd just rather not. And she explained, "This song I wrote about a party that I went to for a boy. I was really excited, and it turns out he brought a girl to the party, so basically I went. I did not ever see him for the entire party, and I smoked on my weed by myself. And I had a fantastic time." In the chorus, SZA sings, "Tell me if it's warm enough here for you, asking you good, you comfortable, maybe just making small talk because it seems like it's not her house." After that line, though, SZA questions, "Is it warm enough inside me?" Which I take as her questioning whether she loves herself enough because she doubts that she does, but also in a "why doesn't he want me? Why doesn't he want to hook up with me?" sort of way, probably both questioning it and fantasizing about it. SZA's self-doubt and insecurity are further confirmed in the second verse.
So lonely, I forget what I'm worth. We get so lonely, we pretend that this works.
This verse seems more about how her self-doubt manifests into bad romantic relationships beyond just the awkward confrontations that happen in the beginning of the song. And that's actually something that gets explored on most of the songs on this album. In the song's outro, the choruses kind of come together as a series of weird little question fragments that don't necessarily have a full meaning. But work to show how SZA hasn't really resolved her emotions by the song's end. The song's title comes from SZA's lifelong love for Drew Barrymore, but more specifically her movies Poison Ivy and Never Been Kissed. Different vibes for sure, but both have these themes of feeling rejected both socially and romantically and feeling like a misfit. SZA also explains she imagined her song Drew Barrymore as one of those songs that plays at the part in teen rom-coms where the main character gets rejected or has that realization that the guy she's into may be into someone else.
Your laugh, even in the movies and in real life, it's very much, it just reminds me of all the things about myself that make me nervous, but on you it shines so brightly. You gave me permission to be myself and feel like this is so cool.
SZA's also said that Drew Barrymore inspired her to kind of just be okay with being quirky and being herself. Also fun, full circle moment is that SZA's first talk show interview was with Drew Barrymore because obviously Drew did not have the show at the time that this song was released. The video for Drew Barrymore depicts a gloomy, muted morning after in which SZA and the other partygoers eat pizza in the city and do laundry, seemingly just a little reset for the next night out partying. And Drew Barrymore actually makes a brief cameo in this video showing up to the second party. Though SZA's with friends for most of the video, you're still about to get that "I'm not alone, but I feel lonely because I'm sad that my crush isn't paying me any attention even though my besties are here" vibe. She's alone for a good chunk of the video, and for the most part when she is with her friends, she's leading the pack, too in her own head to notice what's up with them. But by the end of the video, SZA's able to finally let go on the snowy rooftop and be in the moment with her friends. These themes of inner conflict, especially the type that manifests itself in the form of rocky relationships, that definitely continues with Control's second single, Love Galore.
When you know you don't want me, why you bother me when you know you got a woman?
And I guess this album technically doesn't have a title track, but I would say this might be the flagship song of the album, if you will. It starts with this cool, bouncy percussion that sounds like small droplets rippling in a pond. And Travis Scott, who's featured on the song, opens with SZA following shortly after, narrating her disinterest with relationships after having been let down so many times.
I actually don't argue. I don't want to argue. I just rather not talk to you. So it's like, if we go off and really go there to the point where I'm talking crazy, it's like we're probably neither going to talk to each other again by the time I'm done.
Seems like she's on a back and forth with an ex, maybe not even an ex, but the person who's got her feeling like all men suck, though she's clearly still entertaining him. It's a messy situation, one that seems like initially was meant to be a fling, especially because the guy wasn't serious about SZA, but as soon as she arrives at the same conclusion, or at least says that she does, now he wants to make the fling something it's not.
You hear me when you know better, know you know better.
And the entire song really can be summed up by the question, why you bother me when you know you don't want me? Or the question, why you bother me when you know you got a woman? Which was pretty popular to quote at the time because, timeless. I was surprised to find out that these lines open some of the verses and they're actually not the song's chorus. The biggest irony in Love Galore is that SZA's basically like, things are fine as long as we got love, when the song is basically describing a situationship, cheating even, depending on how official things are with the other girl this dude's with. It reminds me of that thing where the person can't say I love you because they don't, so they're like, oh, I got love for her, instead of saying I love her. Travis's verse provides the male perspective to this song, basically echoing SZA's, because they're both pointing the finger at each other.
You were the one that left me in a wreck, me in a mess.
Love Galore is one of the songs written for Control that was written in late 2016. I don't know the backstory between Travis Scott and SZA, but it is interesting once you realize he was also collaborating with Rihanna and James Fauntleroy at this time. Just like SZA was, and one of her songs ended up on Anti. Not interesting in the allegations copying whatever sense, just cool when you realize some projects are heavily characterized by similar little bubbles of people working together or sessions, especially if there's overlap in the genre. And SZA said that she wanted to work with Travis because she liked the juxtaposition of the darkness of his music and the brightness that she intended to bring with Control.
Definitely a huge fan of Travis. I think he merges that super fine line between melody and syncopation, and I love his pockets and I love his no choice. And
Love Galore does sound very bright. I think because from SZA's perspective in the song, she's not necessarily letting go of this guy or situationship, but finally feels relieved that she has the emotional upper hand for once. I think also that playful bounciness in the song kind of points out how childish the roles that SZA and Travis play are. Though we can't say it's not fun to listen to, and though many listening to the song can't say they haven't been there themselves. And I'm sure that's a big reason the song got as popular as it did, because like I said, so many people listening to this song could easily recall a hazy relationship situation. Maybe they were even going through it in that moment. I was in college when this album came out, and I distinctly remember some of my friends using specific songs like Love Galore or like The Weeknd to describe the situation they were in. The music video again draws from SZA's love for movies, as it's inspired by the film adaptation of Stephen King's Misery. In it, a famous novelist named Paul is rescued from a car accident by his #1 fan named Annie. Annie nurses Paul back to health in her home, but she becomes enraged when she learns that Paul killed off her favorite character, so she holds him captive and forces him to rewrite this story. So the main theme here obviously isn't romance, but rather interest that borders into obsession and this unhealthy desire not just to possess someone, but for them to fit exactly into that fantasy you imagine, or even have them create it. In the video, Travis plays a version of Paul and SZA plays a version of Annie, though maybe it's implied that she's even more obsessed than Annie because a character that looks exactly like the film version of Annie shows up in the video after SZA's already got Travis tied up. And at the end, SZA and Annie are both Annies, you know what I mean? They fade into one another, kind of leading me to believe SZA herself is Annie, just like an alternate timeline version or something, because we see a butterfly, which symbolizes SZA float by at the end, where we only see similar to film version Annie. I hope that makes sense. Also, fun fact, this video is the first one that's uploaded to SZA's own independent YouTube account. As like I said, the previous music videos of hers were uploaded to Top Dog's account. And the Drew Barrymore video actually wasn't released until after this one, even though the single had already been out. I found a few tweets as well as pop-head posts from the time of people saying, yeah, Love Galore has me dying for an album now, and if Top Dog doesn't put out an album after this, they definitely don't know what they're doing. And less than a month after Love Galore's release in late May of 2017, it was announced that Control finally had an official release date of June 9th. Sony's press release reads, "The recent release of the Love Galore single and video were met with rave reviews from fans and critics alike, including Pitchfork, Stereo Gum, Billboard, Vibe, and more. The Fader calls the track a smooth collaboration. SZA and Travis Scott display magnetic chemistry, while Paper summarizes the song as a perfect breezy springtime jam for your Carrie Bradshaw at her MacBook moods, and if you haven't caught major feelings for SZA by the time the song is over, then we really have nothing further to discuss." The album was also announced with a trailer featuring Wu-Tang's RZA, who's the person who inspired SZA's stage name, saying the wait for Control is finally over.
Peace and blessings. My name is the RZA from the almighty Wu-Tang Clan. I'm zoning in with my homegirl SZA.
And this was posted to Top Dog accounts. Control's cover, also unveiled at this time, shows SZA lounging on the ground in the woods, surrounded by old computer monitors. I don't even think it's a stretch to say that this cover has since become iconic, definitely one where the cover kind of gets treated like a regular photo or art piece because it's so striking. It's definitely become a staple in a lot of vinyl collections because the cover is perfect for it. I'm thinking of something I said in some unpopular opinions video forever ago about how usually if artists go textless on the cover, it's not with a debut album because they don't want to risk you not knowing what it's called, lest you want to search or find it later. Same with their stage name. Because if you heard a SZA song that you like but have no idea what SZA looks like, walking past this album in a record store, you may be none the wiser. One, SZA could have just decided not to put the text on her album cover for aesthetics only, but I also think it speaks to the internet's impact on music consumption. We're pretty firmly in the streaming era by 2017, so if this album comes up on your shuffle, even if you see it on social media, it's likely there will be a caption or Spotify or Apple will tell you that it's SZA. Also, like I mentioned, SZA had a pretty solid internet presence at this time, especially amongst those likely to listen to her music, even if she wasn't a household name. This also ties into the old computers on the cover, representing an outdated form of technology, something that no longer works in a sense. Not only that, but the album's title, Control, abbreviated in the way that it is a direct reference to the keyboard command. But such a command is useless on a broken, outdated computer, and even if the computers could be fixed or aren't broken at all, they're certainly not going to work out in the woods where they can't be plugged in. So I take this to represent SZA's loss of control, her feeling disoriented, and attempting to regain said control in a new phase of life. As she's in her mid-20s when recording, late 20s when this album's released, also in a new career, a new age in the sense of this more streaming mobile era. And like I was saying, it's pretty clear that SZA's very online from her music and how present she is online, which can be a positive because it keeps you tapped in, but it also could be a curse if you're constantly using it to compare yourself to others or reading critiques about yourself, especially as your audience grows.
Why is Control the title?
I need to be in control. I've never had control. I love to pretend I'm in control. I love the lie. I love the chase. Like, I don't know, the need. And then I also love relinquishing control and just accepting that this moment is not mine. Like, it's just going to be like allowing the flow of like whatever I'm in to happen. And those are very hard lessons for me. Like,
there's a direct reference to loss of control on Supermodel, which is the album's opener. SZA's mom says,
"That's my greatest fear, that if I lost control or did not have control,
things would just, I would be fatal." The song does live up to this kind of vindictive foreshadowing as it opens on SZA writing a letter or penning lyrics to her ex. She's upset because he left her on Valentine's Day, so SZA's like, well, I've been sleeping with your friend, what now? And then right after, we get to the actual root of the problem where SZA sings,
Why am I so easy to forget like that? It can't be that easy for you to get like that.
Because she's not just hurt by this guy, but like in Barrymore, she's questioning if there's something wrong with her that would make a guy feel inclined to do her dirty, which not really. Shitty people are just going to be shitty sometimes, but that's hard to not internalize. And SZA expresses further insecurity that this guy didn't just leave her, but left her for a prettier woman, and again, doesn't understand why he doesn't see in her what he sees in other girls. I don't want to necessarily call this a pick-me song because I do think it's a little more nuanced than that. And the song really isn't about SZA being just so sad and miserable because her crush doesn't like her, but more about how she thinks that she has the potential to have these positive qualities, be all these positive things, but can only feel good about it or can only realize it if the man she's interested in sees it also.
I could be your supermodel if you believe.
I like how Supermodel begins more chill and acoustic, like SZA's just thinking to herself, writing her letter to this guy, writing in her diary. But as we go further into the song, more instruments are added in, kind of like we can hear the evolution from these things being thoughts written in a letter to becoming a song that's actually performed. And Supermodel ends with SZA questioning, why can't I stay alone just by myself?
Wish I was comfortable just with myself, but I need you, but I need you.
Again, lots of self-questioning in this album, but I also think these points are central to control. In terms of Supermodel, control clearly also means self-control, and like I was saying with Love Galore, sometimes singing about doing things you know that you are completely wrong to do. In her message in the opener, SZA's mom mentions both losing control and simply not having control, which are different things even if we conflate them. Because SZA never really had control over her boyfriend or her ex, even when she was in the relationship, or even when they were in a decent part of the relationship, that's not necessarily having control even if things are under control, because you and the other person do have the free will to change that at any moment. And I feel like when you conflate things no longer being under control to you personally having lost some control, then it's easier to feel like you were wrong and then want revenge. Not only for that relationship ending, but because they had the nerve to do something that you did not allow, or even see coming maybe. Control peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200, where it also debuted, selling 60,000 units in its first week. 20,000 of these sales were pure album sales because, streaming era. Even at the time, the album was being called a modern R&B classic, one that would hopefully usher in a wave of more vulnerable, narrative-driven R&B songs. Control received high acclaim, making several year-end lists, including Time, where it topped the list, as well as Billboard, Pitchfork, Dazed, and NPR, all of whom ranked it the second best album of 2017. In their review, Pitchfork, who gave the album an 8.4, crowned Control's vulnerability as its best feature, noting, "People will go to extremes to absolve themselves of judgment, whether it's for liking something as benign as The Bachelor, or by minding the depths of psychology to determine that breaking someone's heart was somehow just an act of radical self-care." SZA has the grit to say that it doesn't just feel shitty, it is shitty. She's in touch with love's fragilities and understands that it is worth protecting, there's just a lot of tireless work to get it. The record is all the more beautiful for it. The Guardian also called Control's songs dreamy and delicious insights into vulnerability, and note that while Frank Ocean's influence is present, and honestly kind of influenced a whole generation of R&B, SZA does pave a lane of her own on this album. They also note that while big names like Travis Scott or Kendrick Lamar are present, SZA manages to hold her own on those songs and the whole album. Kendrick is featured on Doves in the Wind, a song that they've both said is dedicated to vaginas.
Meaning it's more you see right through walls, ain't talking about see.
To be more specific, the song is about how men take sex with women lightly, and there's so much more to a relationship and genuine connection than that. Sonically, the song has this swirling, trippy hip-hop feel to it. It's very chill and has this kickback vibe to it, and SZA said that with this song, she wanted to embody more masculine energy helped by the vocal samples. Producer Cam Obi said that he and SZA made the song up on the spot at someone's house. Cam explained, "At first it was just SZA on the song, and I love that song because of what she did. What she wanted to do was take this masculine energy, harness it, and channel it in a song designed for female empowerment. That was so genius. The original song with just her on it, the message really gets across. She had this line at the very end. It isn't there anymore. She took her verse off for Kendrick, where she's like, 'My pussy's above you, doves in the wind.' That's why she called it Doves in the Wind. It's like a poem."
And I was like, damn, whoever that is, like, he really puts this beat. And so I was like, as soon as I walked in, SZA, like, she was like, "Oh, hey, yo, K-Dot, yo, that's Cam, the dude I told you about. He's a genius."
And fun fact, Isaiah Rashad was at one of the initial recording sessions for Doves in the Wind when Cam Obi was still making beats for the song, and apparently the beat that they ended up using when Isaiah heard it, he wanted it, but of course it ended up with SZA. And speaking of, SZA has another Isaiah Rashad collab on Control on the song Pretty Little Birds.
Told you I like gentle giants, so you softened up.
Pretty Little Birds has a very cold intro. It kind of feels like a night sky with those synths giving a shooting star vibe before the song slides into some electronic percussion. And throughout the song, SZA uses birds as a metaphor for herself. She claims she's the phoenix, rising from the ashes, being resilient after all this heartbreak and turmoil, yet she's continuously flying into windows like a confused pigeon, aka behaving in petty, destructive ways. And it's not by accident. More so that SZA just always expects her partner or whoever she's with to deal with her constantly sabotaging herself in the relationship. In the second verse, she continues with these fantasy metaphors, this time referring to fairy tales like Jack and the Beanstalk.
You've been stalking just to get to me, love. I wanna be a golden goose.
And I think this kind of shows how both her concept of herself and this relationship, whatever it is, they aren't necessarily in touch with reality. Isaiah's feature comes about 3/4 through the song. I love the echoing and the layering, and it's reinforced by this really deep, hollow-sounding percussion. His part works to assuage the fears SZA expresses, ones that lead her to try and destroy what could be a pretty happy relationship, it seems like.
You fly by the pound, fly by the ounce.
Thinking of flying into windows, compared to flying free like a dove in the wind, flying to the heavens, what have you, think it relates well to this nature versus technology, city versus civilization juxtaposition that we do see throughout Control. And we even see it years before this album existed, all the way back when Top Dawg introduced SZA on their YouTube channel. SZA has a sort of earthy, nature outdoorsy vibe to her for sure, that's present in her music of course, in her fashion, her visuals, but like I've been saying, also present is this very online, very technology interested part of her. Coincidentally, you can see these competing aesthetics in the third and fourth singles, The Weeknd and Broken Clocks respectively. The Weeknd is a breezy, almost lazy sounding song in which SZA catches herself in the midst of a love triangle of sorts. Again, we get that question from Love Galore, almost with the exact wording, how you want me when you know you got a girl. SZA has explained this song is about 3 women who all find out they're dating the same guy, and this guy is basically dividing his time with each of them throughout the week. Eventually all the girls find out
My man is your man, hurt is her man too.
and the song seems to mainly be from the perspective of one of the girls who's okay with there being another woman, or is at least resigned to it. The girl's consolation is that she's probably the most fun of the girls, aka the weekend to their 9 to 5. The laid-back, chill atmosphere of the song is supposed to echo this weekend feeling, as if to convince us, the listener, as well as the guy, that his time is better spent with her.
Ready to take a place, ready to give you what you've been missing on weekdays.
SZA has explained this song isn't really a side chick situation, but more like the girls time sharing the man, but no one's in a committed relationship with anyone. And she explained, time sharing a man is real AF. If we're all being honest, there's very few men that are just dating one woman. I think low-key, the internet makes it so difficult because we're taking in so much information. There's always new, more. Having one person seems like a restriction, like a limitation. Everyone's used to being overstimulated. I feel like men kind of do this thing where they don't want to tell anyone about who they're with because they don't want to lose the opportunity to potentially call you if they needed to. Not saying that they would, but they need the option. So in the song, I'm opting in. Like, I know you have a bunch of girls probably. Maybe you're not being honest with me. I just know that you have mad girls, and I still don't care because I didn't want to be your girlfriend anyway. I'm not internalizing the way that you're acting as disrespect towards me. It doesn't make me any less because you're not my boyfriend. And like, you're not her boyfriend and you're not her boyfriend. You're just out here wildin'. The video opens with SZA in some smoggy, gray, nondescript building block, and across the screen a poem appears. One opted out, an imbalance of power shifted the whole tide. It waved and waved, again explaining the song's story. I saw that some people think the imbalance of power thing that's being shifted is SZA feeling empowered by this relationship. I guess based on her words, it's not even technically a relationship at all, and discovering that she has no desire for one. Others saw it as a fear of the power the man holds in this situation, as he could always leave her and still have other girls, so he's the one who holds the cards. And in this video, SZA does little more than dance around this empty apartment complex, though she seems to be having a very decent time of it. I see this as her kind of only existing to that man when he wants to come visit her on the weekend, but she simultaneously puts a lot of things on hold to wait for him. I do like The Weeknd a lot, but I am partial to the Funk Wave remix done by Calvin Harris.
You take Wednesday, Thursday, and just send him my way.
There's a slight funk vibe in the original, and this remix expands on it, giving it a retro dancey feel. And I think it still works very well for the point of The Weeknd, that sense of fun and escape that we're supposed to feel while listening. And speaking of escape, let's get into Broken Clocks. This has always been one of my favorite songs on Control. As the title suggests, the song also deals with questioning whether you've spent your time wisely and realizing there's little that you can do even if you feel otherwise. All you can do is spend the future time better. SZA opens singing about a series of day jobs that she held, not out of passion, but because, bills.
Running fast from the way it was, jump quick to a paycheck.
In interviews, SZA's talked about working a series of jobs after dropping out of college, including one at a strip club, to the point where she was working 14-hour days.
But I needed more money and I need flexible hours because I can't afford my studio time on 23 hours. I can't afford my studio time on 30 hours. So I have to go. So then I just went to the strip club and bartended, and I made just like a lot more money a lot faster and could pay for virtually anything that I needed.
She references all that in this first verse, but one thing I love about it is the sort of subtle, maybe not even subtle, love and hip-hop reference, because I too used to watch that show a lot. And kind of similar to the aim, or what was once the aim of Love and Hip Hop, music is similarly being shown as a way for SZA to make a life for herself, hopefully. There's this sense of aimlessness throughout the song, both because SZA surrounds herself with people who are hopeless as her, and it's partly because it seems like there's rarely good news in the world anymore. In the pre-chorus, SZA admits that she's just taking things day by day and hopes that it works out, though she isn't sure.
Day by day, ooh, never hearing what they say.
And in the chorus, she says all she's got are broken clocks, referring to how she feels that she's wasting her time, weirdly feeling like she's making nothing of herself, but is also working way too hard at the same time. But there's a sense of optimism that this work will pay off, as SZA is actually on the right path because, as you know, broken clocks are right twice a day. Seems like the post-chorus also refers to SZA trying to get her music career off the ground while trying to keep her life together after her mom kicked her out and then other relationships went sideways, and she's smoking a ton of weed to get through it all.
All that I got, pieces and pages.
I was like kind of embarrassed just because my mom was like starting to be really proud of me because it was like after my failing out of college stint and I had like a job that I was consistent about and like I was doing well and it just like made a very steep turn for I think I have a new hobby.
This song is also pretty percussion heavy. In a way that kind of feels like a bunch of gut punches. You always feel this anxiety, time ticking throughout. Exactly how SZA is singing about. It doesn't even really let up on the chorus. You're kind of just rushed through this song, not really taking a break until the second verse.
You love me. You love me. Gotta shift it 10.
And then the song doesn't pull back again until the bridge, where SZA isn't even really relaxing, rather just saying, yeah, life is beating my ass, y'all. I get up every time, but it is knocking your girl down. But still, Broken Clocks ends on a somewhat optimistic note until the song kind of fades out, as if SZA's nodding off, falling back to sleep before she's got to wake up and do it all over again. The video for Broken Clocks takes place at Camp Control, a fictional summer sleepaway camp for adults. Instead of doing a lot more structured activities like canoeing or fishing or rock climbing, the campers argue during games, have food fights, make it on the picnic tables, arguably behaving like kids. When they are actually doing some sort of activity like archery, seems like they need a little bit of weed to get through it. Again, showing that sense of aimlessness and confusion that SZA felt at the time. And the fact that a lot of other adults feel similarly. But it's not framed as this hopeless, depressing experience, but rather one that's relatable and you can find community in. We do find out Camp Control is really a dream though, kind of how SZA wishes things would be, because when she snaps back into reality, she's really just been knocked out of the strip clubs and still being overworked. Prom, which is my other favorite on Control, is also a song that focuses a lot on wasted time. Like Broken Clocks does with Camp, this song uses prom, something also kind of childlike, both to examine that fleeting feeling and also referring to a time when things were good, even if you didn't realize it, and you look forward to the future, maybe more than you do now. In media, prom is depicted as one of those pivotal moments, especially in terms of the American high school experience, because it's an American thing. It's basically one of the only other moments, other than graduation itself, that both symbolizes a level of maturity, because you're graduating soon, but also that optimism that life beyond high school is beginning soon. SZA uses prom to show not how she's ready for that next step in maturity, but rather how she feels left behind or immature in some ways. This makes sense, considering SZA would have been around 27 when the album came out, so mid-20s at least when the song was written, which is very far past the age of where someone would go to prom. Even in the second verse, she compares herself to Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. And while Dorothy is trying to find her way in the world in that story, she is still a child, which is kind of how SZA feels as she's constantly battling these obstacles that continue to arise. Also similar to Dorothy, she has this desire to escape to the point where she avoids responsibilities, which is something else that can cause people to see her as immature, especially the people that she's in relationships with. SZA pleads with them not to leave her, but it's also obvious to her that people are growing tired of her antics. This is one of the poppier songs on Control with a little bit of disco influence. It's definitely in the vibe of those sorts of retro pop songs I love. You really think of a very neon, hot pink, voluminous tulle dress when you hear Prom. Though I couldn't find any genuinely negative Control reviews of substance, though, obviously there were criticisms here and there, one issue I know that some people took with this album, retroactively I'll say, and take with SZA's songwriting in general, is that it's often described as low vibrational or pick-me music. And I was curious to see if that was something that was being said about SZA with Control when it actually came out, but looking online, it seems like a lot more of that criticism started to be made after SOS dropped. In fact, when you look at reviews that are contemporary with Control's release, especially reviews that focus more on the songwriting, you'll see even the less than savory moments or songs, like Supermodel for example, you'll see them described as painfully honest, blunt, direct, or vulnerable, and that was the word that I used a lot. For example, I really like this review written for Uproxx, which was done after the author saw SZA on tour, and they note, in the process, this album has arguably given voice to the anger and disappointment that a generation of women face when they attempt to construct loving and healthy relationships in a sea of men and women, I've dated a few, who are ill-equipped to reciprocate or are uninterested in providing the interpersonal infrastructure that elevates sex or a hookup to a relationship and to love. Who does that leave a 20-something woman with? The way I feel about a lot of music like this, that to focus on whether the artist or the speaker is coming off as a good person or a bad person, a girl's girl or a pick-me, is to miss the main points of the song, especially when that speaker, that writer, is pretty aware that they're not coming off as a good person. Rather, the song is meant to connect to that other 20-something and echo their feelings and behaviors as human, even if that doesn't mean that they should be celebrated. In fact, 20-something is a song that's a pretty perfect example of being confronted with the consequences of SZA not growing up or getting her life together, at least at the pace that those around her would have liked.
Hoping to keep the rest of my friends, praying the 20-somethings don't kill me.
And because, like I mentioned with Prom also, because they're frustrated with her, they're checking out of those relationships, those friendships. SZA's not saying that this is a good thing or that she didn't deserve this, but she does understand that other 20-somethings feel this way. And honestly, the song is a little shout out to them saying, hopefully I get through it, keep my friends, keep my sanity, whatever of those I have left, and hopefully so do you. And 20-something is actually the final song on Control. It's also the closer when SZA toured the album because it really ends on that note of unity. And the album being SZA's feelings mainly, yes, but things that she knows other people have gone through as well on some level. Referring back to that Sony press release for Control, I really like that Carrie Bradshaw with her MacBook description of the album, because it really captures a lot of what Control is. That intersection of being a young and kind of confused woman, lots of situationships that you like to discuss, make your living out of discussing with an artful spin. And out of all the songs on the album, Normal Girl, honestly, to me, it gives Carrie Bradshaw the most.
Baby girl, you wanna take her home without the mama. The kind of girl I know you fellas, they be proud.
In it, SZA laments that she's not the girl the guy that she likes would take home to mom, and questions how she can become that normal girl, even wishes for it. She uses an interpolation of Drake's Controller to reference how this guy will sleep with her, hang out with her, but for some reason he doesn't want a serious relationship with her. It seems that she thinks it's partly because she's aggressive and is quick to anger, but half the time that getting said about you, it just means that you won't put up with just anything. And I love how there's something kind of boring, elevator music-y about the synths.
Yeah, the way I put my fist to how I bust my hip for your affection, tryna be.
But at the same time, they're kind of persistent like a blaring alarm. Shows that conflict of the normal girl, so to speak, that SZA wants to be, compared to the sort of person, the Spitfire that she actually may be. Aside from that internet aspect and writing about relationships, Carrie Bradshaw is an iconic TV character from the 90s and early 2000s also, I guess. But again, such an apt comparison because listening to this album and a lot of their references on it, you can pinpoint about how old SZA is and when she grew up. Like Drew Barrymore, Gina from Martin, so this time a character, she's another 90s touch point that inspires a song on Control. In Go Gina, Gina's used to show how the guy SZA's with is often frustrating her to the point where she comes off as uptight, though that's not how she genuinely is.
Dr. did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. You see Gina? I don't think you've ever seen her quite like this before.
You guys could just throw this right on the counter, right here.
Gina!
Though she might allow this man to get on her nerves more than she should, that doesn't mean that she's going to reorient her whole life for him. Quite the opposite, actually, because she knows that he's not worth it. So Go Gina is kind of like SZA patting herself on the back with the comparison of this TV character for not letting a man ruin her life, and her doing what works for her for once. And throughout the song, you can hear a little bell ding, kind of like she's got an answer on a quiz right for once or something.
Trying to keep to myself, but you bring me out the character every time again.
Something else, not necessarily just 90s because they existed before, exist after, but I do feel like it's meant to have a sort of dated retro feel, are some of the voicemails used as intros and outros in a lot of the songs. I'm not sure if they're all genuine voicemails because that's what they're called all over the internet, yet Genius calls them skits in the lyrics, and some just sound like sound bites from a conversation, so I don't know. Probably the most popular one, though, is at the end of Love Galore, where SZA's grandmother Norma says sincerely yet firmly, "See, Solana, if you don't say something,
speak up for yourself. They think you stupid. You know what I'm saying?"
These messages, especially the ones with SZA's grandma, became a meme because they became known as a funny way to show tough love. Either that or stringing together phrases that may sound silly, but they're done in an attempt to impart some wisdom.
Am I handsome?
Am you helping me?
Am I handsome?
What?
Regardless, the advice of it all, the vulnerability of it all, that's what makes the album relatable to people. Also, the way it was SZA's grandma giving a lot of this advice either reminded you of your own grandma or that archetypical black matriarch, so it felt familiar. Probably the funniest of these messages is at the end of Garden, also known as Say It Like That.
If you don't like me, you don't have to fool with me. But you don't have to talk about me or treat me mean.
I really love this song too. It's not a fast one per se, but still a very dramatic, layered one. And you can almost hear the reverence in SZA's voice when she sings. This time, she's not singing about a man or any partner, but rather a younger version of herself. You can easily read a lot of the questions, the fears she expresses as something that she would say to a partner, but in this instance, SZA's leaning on herself, even if it's a version that doesn't exist yet. So maybe we could say that she's leaning on faith in herself that she will self-actualize at some point in order to remedy some of these insecurities. And this means that she does believe that it is possible for her to become more confident in herself and less destructive, the way that she sings about in Prom or Normal Girl. Because already you get that note of insecurity when SZA refuses to believe this person loves her, but then you realize that she's in this belief that there's a version of herself that she could ever love. And the song, well, SZA's part of it, ends on that sort of stunned, but happily stunned note. I'm not sure how exactly to word this, maybe it even deserves a video of its own. But now that we're years out of it, I think Control is an album emblematic of that sort of indie, awkward black kid media who loves classic vintage stuff also that was popular at the time. It was sort of an evolution of black nerd media from the 80s and 90s, but also mixed with a lot of music and pop culture from those eras. Again, with that spin of having access to the internet to discover a lot of these cultural touch points aside from your parents and grandparents, so you're getting a lot of perspectives on that vintage lens. I would say that this lasted maybe mid-2010s mostly, so maybe from around like 2014 to 2018-ish. I'm thinking of music collectives like The Internet or Brockhampton, and other artists like Solange or Chloe and Halle, Childish Gambino / Donald Glover, Kehlani, Tyler the Creator, or shows and movies like Dope, Into the Spider-Verse, or Insecure. While it was definitely more youth-focused, I would say that it was something that more catered to teenagers and younger adults, primarily Gen Z and millennials, it seems like. Probably some outliers on either end, but more firmly the generations who really grew up on the internet. And aside from that, probably had a little more proximity to whiteness than their parents' or grandparents' generations. This was the era of being fascinated with Fila and Kangol hats again, purple-blue LED lights, and pretending that we were all living in an episode of Insecure, and every relationship collapsing was in service of the plot. Instagram was like a scrapbook and a journal where you took photos that were authentic, yet curated to look ever so spontaneous. And so many of these Instagram pictures, Control lyrics were the captions at the time. I also remember at the time I followed a lot of artsy accounts and thought it was cool that you could just follow young people who posted art. There was this unspoken context that made these pictures interesting, that these people were on a journey trying to navigate adulthood like the rest of us, but at least were assured enough to let other people in on the journey, the highs, the lows, the art of it all. SZA was actually friends with quite a few of these artists, like Sage Adams, for example, who's featured in that Broken Clocks video and has designed cover work for songs like SZA's The Weeknd and Saturn. It's also Sage who shot the cover of Control, and I remember being obsessed with the Art Ho Instagram account for years. To support Control, SZA started touring in August of 2017, so only about 2 months after the album came out. The tour would last until February of 2018, and on it, SZA would mainly perform songs from Control, of course, but there were also several songs on the track list from her EP Z. The show was praised for its intimate settings, with a lot of reviews saying it made the show feel more genuine, like you were at a chill party with a friend, not like a concert TM. The only time I have seen SZA was on the SOS tour, and it was a fun show. I really did like it, and getting to see her in an arena, it's a good sign an artist is growing. I could definitely see how with SZA's music and her vibe overall, that it would be more enjoyable to see her in a smaller venue where less is happening around you and you don't need to fill the whole stage with enough spectacle to entertain an arena. And despite the acclaim that SZA received for Control, the song did not earn her any Grammy wins. It did, however, earn her a Best New Artist nomination, as well as nominations for Best Urban Contemporary Album, Best R&B Performance, Best R&B Song, as well as Best Rapper Sung Performance. So that's 5 nominations, making SZA the most nominated female artist that night, again, despite not taking home any awards. It's since come to be remembered as a pretty egregious Grammy snub. And Twitter was hot, as you would assume, with several even comparing this to the treatment that Anti got the year before. Some did consider the 2018 Grammys to be bittersweet because it felt like Kendrick, who's, another top dog artist, and another black one more generally, honestly, he was finally getting his dues after having been snubbed years before. Something else interesting about Control, especially when you take its acclaim into account, is that SZA has implied several times, or even said, that it's not necessarily the debut album that she herself would have put out. Just a month after the Grammys, articles were published revealing that Control wasn't some super meticulously ordered album, and SZA had wavered on the track list a few times. She herself said, "I just made a gang of songs over the course of 4 years. Heard them all together, and I was like, alright." And by gang of songs, she did mean hundreds, saying in a different interview, "They just took my hard drive from me, that was all. I just kept fucking everything up. I just kept moving shit around. I was choosing from 150, 200 songs, so I'm just like, who knows what's good anymore." By they, she means her label, Top Dog, and SZA went on to say that given another month or so to mess around with the songs, Control might have sounded completely different, so I guess we'll never really know. In 2022, though, to celebrate the album's 5th anniversary, SZA did release 7 more tracks as Control's Deluxe, and one of them was, just the official release of 2 a.m. Also on this Deluxe is a solo alternate version of Love Galore with an extra SZA verse instead of Travis's rap feature.
Been looking good, I've been feeling nice, working on my aura, cleaning up, working overtime.
SZA had performed this version on late night shows a few times and also performed it while touring, and this is the version that would trend on TikTok. I can't even remember if it was before or after it officially got released, but it was trending. And it's funny that, like with Lana, you can see people saying that they do like these songs, they were happy for new SZA music, but they would have been fine if they were just on a separate EP rather than a Controlled Deluxe. But SZA framed this Deluxe mainly as something for her fans, for supporting the album for as long as they had, and they really were supporting it because the album has broken several chart records. At that point, so in 2022, the album had spent 260 weeks in the Billboard Hot 200, and now it's at over 400 weeks. This makes Control the second longest charting R&B album by a woman, just behind Anti. And in September of 2024, the album became the longest charting streak for any female artist in Billboard 200 history at 378 consecutive weeks. I'm not sure if the record has since been broken, but I don't think so, because in February of 2025, Control became the first female album to chart for 400 consecutive weeks on the Billboard 200. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. Also, if you'd like to become a channel member and get early access to videos, the link is in the description. And again, thank you so very much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.